A quiet moment that changed everything. Maurice Benard's emotional turning point. GH-inspired story. The studio lights were dimmer than usual that afternoon, casting long shadows across the familiar set that Maurice Benard had walked onto for decades. To everyone else, it was just another workday. To Maurice, it felt different, heavier, more personal, as if something unspoken had been waiting years to surface. Those close to him noticed it right away. He wasn't his usual animated self between takes. He smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. When someone asked if he was okay, he answered with a nod, the kind that says yes without really meaning it. No one pushed. After all, Maurice Benard was known as a professional, someone who always delivered, no matter what. But that day, something unexpected happened. During a rehearsal, the director called for a brief reset. Maurice stood still, staring at a spot just beyond the camera. The lines he had delivered hundreds of times suddenly carried new weight. They weren't just words anymore. They felt personal, almost reflective. When the director asked if he needed a moment, Maurice hesitated. Then he quietly said, "Yeah, I do." The room fell silent. It wasn't dramatic. There was no announcement, just a simple request that spoke volumes. Maurice stepped away, sat down, and took a breath. One breath turned into several, and then, without warning, emotion surfaced. Not loud, not overwhelming, but honest. Those nearby didn't interrupt. They didn't need to. Everyone understood they were witnessing something rare. A man who had spent years portraying intensity, allowing himself to feel it without a script. Later that day, Maurice agreed to sit down for a short, informal conversation, something he hadn't planned and certainly hadn't prepared for. What began as a light discussion about work quickly shifted into something deeper. "I've played so many intense moments," he admitted, voice steady but soft. "But sometimes the hardest thing is letting yourself feel when the cameras aren't rolling." He spoke about the pressure of being strong, dependable, and consistent, not just for the show, but for the fans who had grown up watching him. He talked about how gratitude and responsibility often walk hand in hand, and how that balance can be emotionally demanding. There's this idea that if you're successful, you're supposed to have it all figured out, but that's not how life works. For many listening, it was the first time they had heard him speak so openly, not as a character, not as a performer, but as himself. Word of the moment spread quickly, not as gossip, but as admiration. Fans didn't respond with shock, they responded with connection. Messages poured in describing how Maurice's honesty mirrored their own quiet struggles. People shared stories of holding things together for family, work, or expectations, even when it felt heavy. They weren't reacting to sadness, they were reacting to truth. What surprised many fans most wasn't that Maurice showed emotion, it was how calmly and courageously he did it. There was no breakdown, no spectacle, just authenticity. The atmosphere on set shifted in subtle but meaningful ways after that day. Cast members checked in with each other more often. Conversations became more thoughtful. Laughter felt lighter, not forced. It was as if Maurice's openness had given everyone permission to be human, even in a high-pressure environment. One longtime co-star later reflected, "It reminded us we're more than the roles we play, and that matters." Maurice himself didn't treat the moment as something monumental. In fact, he downplayed it. "I didn't plan to say anything," he admitted later. "I just didn't want to pretend." What made this moment stand out wasn't vulnerability alone. It was the redefinition of strength. For years, fans had associated Maurice with intensity, power, and control. This moment added something new to that image: emotional honesty. Strength, he showed, doesn't always mean pushing forward without pause. Sometimes it means stopping, acknowledging what you feel, and continuing with clarity. And that message resonated far beyond the studio walls. In the days that followed, Maurice returned to work with the same dedication, but with a noticeable lightness. Not because anything had been fixed overnight, but because something had been acknowledged. He later shared a simple thought that stayed with many fans. Feeling doesn't slow you down, ignoring it does. That line alone became a quiet mantra for viewers who had long admired him for his performances and now admired him even more for his honesty. This wasn't a storyline. It wasn't a publicity moment. It was a real, unscripted reminder that behind every legendary performance is a real person navigating real emotions. And that's why fans were stunned, not by tears, but by courage. Maurice Benard didn't just open up about emotions that day. He reminded everyone watching that being human is not a weakness. It's the foundation of everything meaningful.
The atmosphere on set still felt different. Cast members and crew alike seemed more aware of each other, more patient, more willing to check in, even during the most hectic days. What Maurice had shared wasn't just a fleeting moment, it had created a quiet shift in energy. Even the producers noticed. A routine meeting turned into a discussion about mental health and emotional support for everyone on the set. It wasn't about publicity, it was about acknowledging that everyone carries invisible burdens and that recognizing them can strengthen the team. Maurice himself noticed subtle signs of change among his co-stars. One of the younger actors, who had been struggling silently with anxiety, approached him after a rehearsal. "Your words the other day, they made me realize it's okay to admit when things feel heavy," they confessed, eyes glistening. Maurice smiled gently. "It's not a weakness. It's a reality we all share. You don't have to carry it alone." The honesty inspired others to speak up too. Conversations that had once been superficial now carried depth, empathy, and understanding. And for Maurice, that was a rare gift, a sense that something meaningful had been sparked without any grand gesture, just quiet authenticity. Meanwhile, word of Maurice's candid moment had spread online. Social media exploded, not with gossip, but with heartfelt messages. Fans shared personal stories about struggles, resilience, and finding courage in moments they thought no one noticed. Some fans created fan art, depicting Maurice not just as the intense characters he played, but as someone real and relatable, a figure of emotional bravery. Others wrote letters thanking him for showing that even someone admired for strength can be vulnerable, and that being open about feelings is a form of courage. Maurice read some of the messages quietly, at home, late at night. He was touched in ways he hadn't expected. For years, he had been known for his on-screen intensity, his dramatic storylines. Now, he was realizing that real impact sometimes comes from simply sharing your humanity. Maurice began reflecting on his own life. He realized that in his dedication to work, to fans, and to portraying complex characters, he had sometimes neglected his own emotional well-being. He decided to make small, intentional changes, taking moments to pause between scenes, journaling at night, and speaking openly with trusted friends and family. These weren't grand gestures, but they created a sense of balance he hadn't felt in years. And slowly, this balance began to influence his performance. Viewers noticed a subtle shift on screen. The intensity was still there, but it carried a new layer, authenticity born of self-awareness. Maurice even addressed fans directly in a short, heartfelt video. Without drama, without theatrics, he spoke plainly. Life is complicated. We all face challenges, and sometimes it's scary to admit that we're not okay. But sharing that, reaching out, being honest, doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. The response was overwhelming. Thousands shared their own stories, creating a chain of connection that stretched far beyond the show. Maurice realized that one quiet moment of honesty had sparked something far greater, a reminder that vulnerability is contagious in the best way. Back on set, Maurice carried himself differently, not more fragile, but more grounded. His emotional openness had strengthened his relationships both on and off camera, and he knew this wasn't the end of the journey. There were still challenges ahead, Life rarely gives anyone a smooth path, but Maurice had discovered a new kind of strength, one that wasn't about control or intensity. It was about honesty, courage, and connection. For fans, this wasn't just another storyline. It was a lesson in being human, delivered not through a script, but through lived experience. And for Maurice Benard, it was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful moments happen not in front of the camera, but in the quiet acknowledgement of our own hearts.
It didn't take long for the ripple effects of Maurice's emotional honesty to reach the fictional world he helped create. On set, writers noticed a subtle difference in his performance, something softer, more nuanced, yet just as compelling as the intensity he was known for. During a scene with a longtime co-star, Maurice's character, usually stoic and commanding, hesitated in a moment where he had never hesitated before. A small pause, a flicker of vulnerability, and the scene suddenly carried a depth the cameras hadn't captured in years. The director called cut, and the room was unusually silent. No one said a word at first. Then one of the producers spoke. This feels different, real, raw. It's like we're seeing him through the character for the first time. Maurice, catching his breath, nodded. Sometimes what's real off camera just slips in. I can't force it, but it happens. The subtle shift on screen stirred curiosity among the cast. One actor, whose character had long been at odds with Maurice's, approached him privately. "You're different lately," they said cautiously, "and honestly, it's throwing me off my game." Maurice smiled gently. "Maybe that's good. Maybe it's time the characters, and maybe even we, start feeling a little more real." That simple truth ignited tension, but in a productive, layered way. Scenes that had once felt predictable now carried unpredictability because Maurice's authenticity introduced a new emotional variable. The fans quickly picked up on the difference. Comments on social media were flooded with observations. Maurice's scenes feel alive in a way they never have before. Is it just me, or does his character seem so human lately? You can feel every emotion he's holding back. It's breathtaking. Maurice smiled quietly as he read the responses. What had started as a personal moment of honesty had now transformed into an on-screen evolution that connected with viewers in a way he hadn't anticipated. Away from the cameras, Maurice confided in his family. He spoke about how sharing his emotions had shifted not only his work, but his relationships. His children noticed he was listening differently, laughing differently, and even pausing before reacting, truly present in ways that had been rare in the past. Sometimes I think people only see what you show them, but if you're brave enough to let them see a little of what you feel, it changes everything. His spouse hugged him, sensing the vulnerability, yet the strength beneath it. On screen, the writers decided to mirror this emotional breakthrough. Maurice's character was given a new arc, one where he confronted past mistakes, faced fears he had long avoided, and connected with others on a deeply human level. It was risky. Longtime viewers expected intensity, not subtle reflection. But when the episode aired, the response was overwhelming. Critics praised the authenticity, fans were emotional, and Maurice felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, not from accolades, not from approval, but from the knowledge that being honest, truly honest, can change both the world you live in and the world you create. Maurice realized that strength isn't just about dominating a scene or commanding attention. It's about showing up fully, letting your humanity shine, and trusting others to meet you there. The ripple of one quiet moment, one unplanned pause, one tear, one honest breath had transformed his work, his relationships, and the hearts of countless fans. And he knew this was just the beginning.